Hello, everybody. Welcome to our annual panel discussion on career paths in STEM. My name is Aaron Geller. I'm the director of our NSF-funded Research Experiences for Undergraduates program here at Northwestern University in the CIERA Astrophysics Center. And we have a great group of panelists today with us on Zoom. We also have a bunch of undergraduates, both from Northwestern, sitting behind me, and from all across the country. And we're really excited to have this panel today. I want to give a big thanks to all of our panelists who are here. And I also want to thank the co-director of our RU program, sitting beside me, Chichka Starkenberg. Chichka did all the hard work to organize this panel. And so I'm just giving the introduction. I'm going to hand this over to Chichka so she can introduce the panelists and get the discussion started. So please take it away.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so welcome everybody to this panel discussion today. And to introduce the panelists, I would actually like to ask them to introduce themselves, because then they show up on the Zoom and you can actually match the voice with the person. So I would like to call on you, and if you could just say your name and what your current position and field is. Okay, so I'd like to start with Cody.
Thanks, Jitska. My name is Cody Dirks. I am actually an alumni of Northwestern CIERA. I got my PhD in astronomy and astrophysics from CIERA several years ago, and I'm currently a senior machine learning scientist at a company called Strong Analytics, a data science consulting company out of Chicago, Illinois.
Thank you. Okay, so next I'd like to ask Taka.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Taka Tanaka. I'm a former astrophysics PhD. I did a couple of postdocs. I'm currently the head of data at Rock 360, which is a financial firm that funds real estate projects.
Okay, thank you. And then I'd like to ask Vivian to introduce herself.
Hey everyone, I'm Vivian Baldessari. I'm an assistant professor of physics and astronomy at Washington State University. So many of you are joining us from University of Washington. Hi from the other side of the state, and happy to be here with you all today.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have one other panelist who will be joining us a little bit later, which is Lauren Corliss. She's the head of education and public outreach for the Roman Observatory at SSC. So to start us off, I'd like to start with one question, and hopefully after that, hand it over to all of the students. And so my question would be, could you all briefly describe your path, how you got where you are now, and especially when you realized that your current position was something that you could and wanted to do. And is there anyone who'd like to start? I could point to someone.
I can go ahead and start.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so I was always a little space nerd growing up, so I always loved astronomy. And so for undergraduate, I majored in physics at the Southern Illinois University Edwardsville campus. From there, I decided I wanted to continue along that path. And so I focused in astronomy for my PhD studies at Northwestern. And about halfway through, I really started to get really heavy into doing data science, a lot of programming with Python and stuff like that. And try to build a lot of projects around that during my time doing research at Northwestern. So I would try and find a way to program something, code up my own way to fetch data, things like that, and just realized that I really love doing that part of the research process. And so eventually decided I want to go into industry and focus on a job where I can do that kind of stuff, still do a kind of research-oriented role. And so I landed with data science consulting, where I do kind of a wide range of stuff from doing research and data analytics to building production pipelines to allow companies to build out their own data science platforms and stuff like that. So I've kind of leaned really heavily into the coding side that I first learned while I was at Northwestern. Even though I still have a little bit of love for astronomy, I still like to keep up in the field whenever I can. But yeah, that's what led me to my current company, Strong Analytics.
Thank you. And Taka or Vivian?
Okay, so yeah, I took a meandering path to where I am today. I did I studied physics at Cornell as an undergrad. I went to a I went to a PhD program. I did not like it, so I left after 1 year. I worked several odd jobs for about a year. I really missed the science, so I went back to a different PhD program, but I did that in an indirect way. I got a part-time position as a research assistant before I applied in the next cycle as a PhD student. I eventually got my PhD. I did 2 postdocs, and then I kept striking out on the faculty job market. I had a non-tenure track professor position. I kind of got tired of applying to postdocs and faculty positions, so I left. So whereas Cody did the smart thing and studied up on Python during his PhD, I was doing most of my coding up until that time, all in Fortran, which no one uses in industry. So then I quickly taught myself Python, went through a boot camp for data scientists called Insight Data Science, which is on hiatus currently. I went into data science consulting, where I consulted with some of the largest media brands in the world. So like, I can't name all of my former clients, but biggest streaming services and cable channels that you've heard of. Then I worked for Weight Watchers after that, then at a startup that you will probably never hear of. And then I joined this real estate finance firm. So it's been a meandering path. But the thing that's the common thread throughout has been using my head. I like math. I like figuring things out. I like looking at real world problems and then using math and data to solve them. And then being able to do that collaboratively with a great group of people. And so one thing I really like about my current job is that I get to choose the people I work with. So I get to assemble the team, and I really like working with all the non-technical folks at my company. And then I kind of huddle with the team and say, okay, how do we solve these business problems and how do we do it, in the right way? So that's something I really enjoy.
Thank you.
So I didn't start college knowing that I wanted to go into astrophysics. My specific research area is on searching for supermassive black holes in dwarf galaxies. But I loved physics in high school, so I knew I wanted to major in physics. I went to Hunter College for my undergraduate, which is one of the City University of New York schools, and I majored in physics there. There was not a lot of astronomy, but they did hire one astronomy-focused professor while I was there, and I was able to do research with her, which was really influential for me. And I did an REU as well when I was an undergrad, which was also very influential in terms of giving me research experience in Astro, which gave me the confidence to apply for PhD programs in astronomy and astrophysics. So I did my PhD at the University of Michigan, and then after that, a postdoc at Yale, and then was very lucky to land here at my current position at Washington State University. I'm still pretty new here, so I've been here for 2 years now, so very much still learning how to juggle teaching and research and grant writing and advising, but I really like the diversity of things that I get to do, and I like being able to be in a department where I can help shape things and make change and feel like I'm having an impact. So those parts of my job are incredibly rewarding.
Hey, thank you all. And now I'd like to open the floor to questions. Yeah.
Can you guys each talk about what the day-to-day looks like at each of your positions?
Who would you like to start, or
Whoever wants to start, any of them.
I can start. So over the summer, it's really nice because most of my day-to-day is working with my students, doing some of my own research, and then also this summer has been a lot of grant writing. So this summer's been more or less divided between meeting with students individually and in group meetings, my own research and reading papers and writing grants. With a couple weeks until the start of the semester, some of that is transitioning to prepping for my fall classes. During the semester, it's a mix of prepping for teaching classes, which my load is 1 class per semester, grant writing, committee work, and honestly, minimal time for my own research, but lots of time for advising students and getting to live vicariously through the awesome work that they're doing. So there's a lot of different things, and it varies from day to day, and some are a lot of fun and some are less fun, but it's nice to be able to move from one thing to another.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go next. So my day-to-day tends to be a mix of doing data science research, and that might be something really similar to what I did in grad school, which was like, having a Python notebook open, exploring some data, maybe doing some research into some new and novel machine learning methods that I might want to apply to that data. I would say that is at least half of my time spent usually. And then the other half tends to be taking that information that I get and either communicating it to whatever client I'm working with. So building presentations, summarizing it in either a technical or non-technical way, depending on the client. And then also building up entire pipelines to process that data, apply models that I care about, report the results maybe to the client. Building those pipelines takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So as much as I could say I could do everything in notebooks anymore, we tend to move past that and then, actually work in cloud services like AWS or Azure, things like that, to build more robust production pipelines to process all that stuff.
So up until a couple of years ago, my day-to-day looked a lot like Cody's. These days, I'm much more advising my team on how to do those things and solve those problems. So I'm usually in a typical work week, I spend about 25 to 30 hours in meetings. So my role is as basically an administrator or an executive. So it's a mix of meetings between non-technical folks at my company and outside my company, and also doing a lot of project meetings and just guidance for my team. And my team is about 20 plus people right now. So it's a pretty significant number of people to manage. So yeah, that's my day to day.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask if there's a question from Zoom, from anyone on Zoom at the moment. Yes, I see one hand. Please go ahead.
Hello. I'm wondering if you all took any time off before starting your PhDs, or if you didn't, how you would navigate thinking about that decision.
Yeah, I'll just say that I did not take any time off. So I graduated from my undergrad and then moved up to Chicago for my PhD about 2 months later. So I guess I had the usual summer break that a college student might have, but moved to Northwestern a month or two before their semester started to kind of get involved with my professor, kind of get started on some basic research projects. And I felt like that period, while I was still working, wasn't super intensive. That can vary a lot from advisor to advisor, obviously, but my advisor was pretty good about letting me kind of work up slowly to the research process in my first few months, maybe up to a first year there. Although I will say I wish I had taken some time off, but that depends on everyone's situation. And so I don't want to say one way or another if it's preferable for you or not.
My first attempt at a PhD, I went straight in. As I said earlier, it was not a great experience for me. So then I dropped out. Then took a lot of time to get back into it. So I did a research assistantship and then my PhD. And then, yeah, I didn't really take a break other than that kind of meandering hiatus.
I didn't take a break between my undergrad and PhD. partially because of this unfounded fear that if I did, I would be somehow behind or forget everything that I had learned and not be able to recover it. So in hindsight, I wish that I had maybe taken a little time off because I don't think that was a reasonable anxiety for me to have. But everyone is different and has their own path. So that's just to say that I had this anxiety that I think many people might have, and I don't think it was founded in reality.
Okay, thank you. Any question from here? Can you try to speak up?
For the two of you in data science, how much of an impact has the fact that you have a PhD had on your career prospects, if any?
What's
I
the
would-
question clear?
So the question was, tell me if I'm repeating it correctly. How much of an impact did the PhD have on my current career?
Yeah.
I would say it had a large impact in unexpected ways. So as an example, the boot camp that I participated in to get into data science recruits PhDs almost exclusively. So you have to have a PhD or have some other exceptional background to be considered for that program. And I'd say that was instrumental in getting my foot in the door. I'll say that the thing that's really helped me is, well, there are several things that I think were transferable that I learned during my PhD and then through my two postdocs. One is, of course, being able to do independent research, being able to hear about a project or a problem in a business meeting, and then immediately start to say, okay, I'm building a mental map of how I would tackle this problem. These are the first steps. These are the next steps. These are the possible pitfalls and bottlenecks. These are the plan Bs. So that 5 minutes into that conversation, I'm already thinking about a plan on how to solve that problem. So being able to do that independently and map out projects was a huge factor that's been really helpful in my career. I would say, like, perhaps unexpectedly, the thing that I was really able to hone during my academic career was my communication and what's often called soft skills. So being able to communicate and teach and explain highly technical concepts to non-technical stakeholders, right? They might not know anything about statistics or A/B testing or physics, or even, they might not have had math beyond high school or college, and they might not have forgotten half of it. So being able to communicate the essence of those things, being able to mentor and teach and collaborate with people, those are the things that I think really, a lot of people can do math. A lot of people use those kind of physics-y, mathy abilities in their data science careers and engineering careers, what have you. I would say, like, the thing that's really shaped my career path is really the communication skill set.
Thank you. Cody, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I will say for my particular company whose experience I can speak to, it's definitely not a requirement to get a PhD. Like, we have a lot of employees. I guess I should kind of frame that. We're about 20, 25 employees right now, just to kind of provide some context. And people from different backgrounds, like some people who majored in computer science or statistics in undergraduate, and then were able to move into a role kind of similar to mine based on that. Some people who got some secondary or some post-grad education, and then some people who did go all the way to the PhD. But the kind of main through line of all these people is kind of similar to what Taka just said, is that these people can approach these problems. They know how to do their own research, and that they can be given a problem, whether it's a research problem, a problem from a client, something like that, and kind of formulate that into a discrete task that they can then go do and perform that research on. And I think that's the main thing that companies like mine and people who hire into those companies are looking for, is the ability to do that stuff. And you do pick up a lot of those skills during a PhD program. It's not the only place to learn that kind of stuff, but I think it's why you see a lot of that is because those programs do kind of teach you how to be an independent researcher, how to approach problems effectively and efficiently, and then apply the skills that you have to solve those problems.
Okay, thank you. So as I don't see any hands on Zoom, I'm gonna ask a question from the chat. So what were some of the biggest challenges you had while going for your PhD?
I think,
And yeah, go ahead.
yeah, the biggest challenge for me was learning to do research. So in undergrad, of course, I had lab jobs and things like that where we helped with research, but it was to do well in undergrad, you have to do well in your courses, right? That's kind of the prime objective. And in grad school, that's really not the case. Of course, you have to pass your courses, but that's not the primary thing. You can do well in your courses and still not be successful in grad school. So being able to take ownership of a research project and say, it's like, this is my problem. This is the thing that I'm going to advance. And by the end of it, I'm going to be, probably the leading expert in the world on this particular project or subtopic. And that was a completely different mindset. It's not working on problem sets by a deadline. It's okay, what am I going to work on today and this week and this month? And being able to be accountable to that when you have all the freedom in the world other than your courses and your teaching load, maybe. It's being able to manage myself and really learn this whole new way of thinking. That for me was the biggest struggle. And it really took me a couple of years to get there, like 2-3 solid years and I slumped really hard through some of those years. And once I figured it out, but that for me was, by far the thing that sticks out the most as being like a huge struggle and something that no one really told me was going to be the case.
Thank you.
I can second a lot of what Taka just said there in terms of being your own independent research, but I also wanted to add some things that I struggled with, which was primarily technical in nature. My advisor was an expert in their field. They've been around for a long time. And so they had kind of a very specific, what I'll call tech stack, a series of tools that they use to do their research. And those are pretty old and dated, if I'm being honest. Things like IRAF, some old Fortran code that they like to use a lot. And so those tools worked for the specific research that they wanted to do, but I wanted to try and learn a new set of tools while I was in grad school. I mentioned previously that I've been getting very interested in Python, similar things like that. And I saw that a lot of other fields and a lot of other, my other cohort were doing stuff like that. So I wanted to, kind of get caught up in that wave too and learn those tools. And so I learned a lot of stuff on my own, and I didn't have a lot of support from my advisor at the time just because they weren't exposed to those tools. They didn't know how to use them. They were thankfully pretty open to letting me kind of redo a lot of that stuff in Python, write a lot of my own code, make sure that I tested it well, stuff like that. They allowed me the freedom to do that, which I was very appreciative of. But branching out and learning those new skills and new tools on my own was kind of a struggle for a while, and probably took me longer to do some things than if I had just used that old tech stack. But I didn't want to do that. I want to learn new things. So yeah.
Thank you. Vivian, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, one of the big struggles for me was that I had done my undergrad degree in physics without astronomy courses, and then I went to an astronomy PhD program. And so kind of catching up on a lot of the stuff that was obvious to some of the other people in my cohort, but was definitely not obvious to me, like magnitudes and filter systems and all this kind of astronomy jargon that you may not know if you haven't taken an astronomy course. Took some time for me to feel comfortable with that. And so that was a bit of an adjustment for me. On kind of a different note, I also struggled a lot with anxiety during my PhD. And so, and I say this having had an extremely supportive advisor and having been in a great supportive department. Grad school can still bring up a lot of those mental health struggles for people. And so managing my mental health was a big part of my PhD, and sort of developing the tools to cope with that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for sharing. Yeah, so we're going to a question from the room. Is there?
I have two questions, but I guess they're kind of interrelated. So the first question is,
how many hours do you typically work per week? And the other question that is sort of interrelated is how self-driven is your position? Because I would imagine that if your position is more self-driven, then you can manage your own time and decide how much work you do per week.
Yeah, I'll start. I'm able to do pretty much exactly 40 hours a week. As part of our system, we obviously keep track of our time so we can build clients and stuff like that. So I actually have a lot of data on exactly how many hours I work a week. And so yeah, it's pretty close. I average about 40 hours a week. I've never felt particular pressure from my company to work a ton of extra hours. Maybe here and there, if we have a particular deadline with a client coming up, we might have to push for something. But they're really flexible about, allowing you the freedom after that to maybe not work a little bit, work fewer hours the week after that, giving you some time off, stuff like that. Yeah.
I think I'm also probably around 40 hours per week, though I don't keep track of it. Sometimes it is more like around grant proposal deadlines or observing proposal deadlines. And that's when it starts to kind of seep into evenings and weekends and things like that. But generally, I try not to work on weekends or anything like that. So while occasionally some kind of deadline imposed extra hours do happen, I feel like I'm maintaining a pretty good work-life balance overall. And my time is very self-directed. So as long as you're kind of doing the things that you need to do, no one is really checking up on you as a professor, which could be good or bad, honestly. There's not a lot of hands-on direction as a new professor. So you kind of are thrown into the deep end, but it's very much self-directed.
I'm going to do kind of a before and after. When I was an early career researcher in academia, I had really poor work-life balance. I was always working on weekends. I would probably work some part, or I was working evenings, and I was always working some part of the weekend, almost always. And the rationale behind that is you need to get papers out. And so if working 5 days a week versus 6+ days a week, if I can write 5 first author papers a year, working 5 days a week, and if I can get that to 6 or 7 by working more, then that's what I was going to do. And so I did that for 4 or 5 years until I kind of burned myself out and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. That was a habit and a mindset that stuck with me maybe the first year or so in industry, and until it really just dawned on me, no one really cares if I'm working evenings. No one expects it of me. They'll look at me out. It's why did you do all that work? It's you don't have to be extra. So now I say I work a pretty healthy 40 hours a week. I take, I try to lead by example in taking vacation days and time off for doctor's appointments and things like that. I work from home 3 to 4 days out of the week, and I go into the office 1 day a week, which is one nice development, I think, especially in the tech sector, where there's a lot of flexibility for people in technical roles to work remotely or in a hybrid situation. So yeah, and usually these days I have a separate laptop for work. I turn it off on Friday afternoon, and then I don't touch it until Monday morning unless there's an emergency.
Okay, thank you. So we have our 4th panelist joining us now. So I wanted to ask Lauren to briefly introduce herself and say her name and position. And Lauren, if you could also, because we started off with that for the other panelists, briefly say what your path has been to your current position and when you realized that your current position was something that you wanted to do and could do. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, hello everyone. I apologize for being late. I run a team of people and we have a planning meeting every 2 weeks where the whole team is together to talk about the work we're going to do for the next 2 weeks. And so moving it is really tricky. So my name is Dr. Lauren Corliss. I'm the head of education and public outreach for the Vera C. Rubin Observatory. So Rubin is an observatory that's currently under construction in Chile. It's set to be finished in about 2 years. And the idea behind the observatory is that it's going to image the southern sky every 3 nights, looking for a whole host of astronomy things, but in particular transients, things that are changing in the sky. So it's this really exciting project that's going to take all of this incredible amount of data and then serve it to the public in a way where we're also providing access directly to the data in a way that's really easy. So hopefully for people who are coming up, we can use all the tools and really interact with the Rubin data directly. So my path towards this career is that I didn't necessarily have a path. So I did my undergraduate at physics, and then I went straight into an astronomy PhD program, actually with Taka. It's good to see you. We shared an office for our first year, or my first year. He was older than me. And then while I was in grad school, I was doing the things that you're supposed to do, doing all the research, and sort of realizing that I was enjoying it, but it wasn't driving me exactly the same way it seemed to be driving other people. But what I was really excited about was doing outreach. So I was at Columbia in New York, which had a really active outreach program. And so I found myself essentially volunteering for every opportunity that existed, oftentimes and be like, oh, well, this will be like what I'm not doing instead of research. This is what I'm getting excited about for the day. And so I think my advice would be to have that sort of presence, to be thinking about like, what is making me happy? Like, what am I excited about for today? And for me, it wasn't going in and like writing a paper. It was going in and talking to a group of school students about, astronomy and why I thought my job was cool. And I still didn't really know that that was a career path. So I went and I started a postdoc because I thought I was still into research. I wanted to do it for a little bit longer. And while I was there, I saw that outreach was actually a career at places like the Rubin Observatory, at the Space Telescope Science Institute, that there are these ways to do outreach as a career. It's like, oh, that's the job that I want. And so I started applying for them and got a position at Rubin. I started as the astronomer on the team, doing a lot of things with data. And then last year was promoted to head of the team. So now I mostly do a lot of management of our team of 9 people to make sure that we're building a successful EPO program for the observatory.
Okay, thank you. And so we're going continuing on with questions now. So we have a question from Benjamin.
Hello, hi. I think my question is, what is your position on grad school and a PhD program? I have heard different things, whether it's necessary or not. And I guess to go into industry, which is what I'm thinking about, is it necessary to do a PhD program or just to go straight into the company or specific position if you really like that?
Is your question for a specific panelist, or would you like to hear from all of them?
It would be for everybody.
Okay.
So Cody mentioned this earlier, but I don't think it is not necessary to have a PhD to go into industry. There's a handful of positions where PhDs are required or strongly preferred. But on my team, maybe a third of people have PhDs. That's probably a high fraction. There are pros and cons to doing a PhD if your goal is to get into industry. It is a huge time sink, right? So you're talking about 5-6 years possibly to get that degree. And so, when you think about, okay, what are you getting out of those 5-6 years that align with your goals, right? And if it's really about gathering the skill sets for industry, it's probably not the most efficient way to go. I would say do a PhD because it aligns with the other things you want to do, like, just knowing more about the field, learning how to do research, learning how to collaborate, learning more about the academic system, things like that. I would say that there are some side benefits to doing a PhD, and I would consider them side benefits, in that there will be some people that will prefer that experience. So it might open up some career paths that it didn't. I know that there's a huge selection effect here, but in my own career path, I connected with a lot of people that was like, yes, I am really interested in having a PhD person lead our team, things along those lines. So there's going to be some ancillary benefits to doing a PhD, but if your goal is to do go into industry and advance their industry career, I don't think it's the most efficient way.
Thank you. Does any of the other panelists would like to add to this?
Yeah, I'll second a lot of what Taka said there in that I also agree that if your eventual plan is to go into industry and do things like data science, stuff like that, it probably is the most efficient route. I say that as someone who went through that and took that route. But at the time, and I still do love astronomy, to be clear, like I wanted to stick with my PhD program because I loved being in the field of astronomy and I loved doing research and learning new things. And over time, eventually realized that it wasn't something I wanted to do for the rest of my career. I wanted to branch out and try some other things. But speaking to my own experience, I was able to gain a lot of really good skills that I think have benefited me as I made that move into industry, and was also in the middle of a field that I loved for the entire time doing it. So like Taka said, that's different for other people, but I can speak to my own experience and say that I got kind of the best of both worlds in that case. And I'm really happy that I did it.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to add on the flip side, like I don't consider myself as being in industry, right? I'm working for an observatory, but my team of 9 people, 3 of us have PhDs in astronomy. So there's a lot of space to be adjacent to science or working in things related to astronomy that don't require a PhD. So like there's web developers on my team, graphic designers, science writers, an educator, who are all doing things in the astronomy space without that sort of technical background. So that's a different direction and way to think about it.
Great, thank you. So I don't know if Vivian wants to add anything to this, but otherwise we'll go to a question from the room if there's one. No question? Yeah? Speak up, please.
So you've kind of alluded to this, but how well does where you are now line up with where you thought you would be at this point in your life when you were in undergrad, or thinking about it? Yeah.
I will say that it's not at all really where I pictured. Like I mentioned earlier, I was kind of a space fanatic all growing up and all through undergrad. And so I was really focused on this idea of like, I wanted to stay in astronomy for my entire life. But I will also say that at the time at the institution I was at, I didn't have a ton of exposure to what being an actual researching astronomer is like. And so I kind of maybe had this idea in my head that what didn't really line up with what the reality was that I learned, over the next 3 years in grad school. And so I think it was just about, for me, not sticking to that like singular vision that I had in my head, to kind of enjoy the experience, learn as I went, and constantly kind of check in with myself and be like, is this what I want to keep doing? Are there other things that I enjoy doing? And kind of following that path as it kind of laid out before me. If some people might want to, stick with astronomy forever, that's awesome. I love it. But I would say that don't, decide for yourself too young what you want to do for the rest of your life.
I would say that, like Cody, I could not have imagined or expected or predicted the job that I have now, let alone the career. I went through the grad school path. Like I've said a couple of times, I dropped out, I came back. I was a career astronomer researcher for, over a decade. And then now I'm in data science. So it's been, and even within data science, I worked for 4 really, to be honest, pretty random companies. And so it's been a really unexpected series of turns. One thing that I did not expect that I'm really happy about when I left astronomy was how connected I've remained to the astronomy community through social media, through personal connections. So I still feel like I know what's going on in astronomy and astrophysics, what the hot research questions are, what the new discoveries are. And that's something that I didn't expect when I left and that I'm really glad for.
So I guess I'll say that once I started doing research as an undergrad and I realized that you could pursue astronomy research as a career, that was my goal. So in some sense, I ended up where I would like to have been at that point. But I tried pretty hard not to hold too tightly to that as I went on in my career, and check in and say to myself, is this, you know, generally bringing me more joy than it is angst? And is this something that I actually enjoy doing, or am I just sort of letting myself be taken along for the ride? And is this, you know, really worth it? And as I've gone on, I felt like it has been. There are other ways in which I feel like I ended up in a place I didn't expect, which is that I grew up in New York and went to school in New York City, and I'm now living in a very rural part of the country, which I would have never thought that I would enjoy, but I actually love it. And so while it's been hard moving around a lot throughout the academic career path, it's also exposed me to a lot of different places and ways to live. And I'm really happy for that, because I really enjoy living in very rural Eastern Washington with a lot of hiking and outdoors.
And then the last thing I'll add is that I didn't have a plan or a vision for what I thought the future would look like. So for people who might feel that way, like, that's okay too. And what's been working for me is just sort of, you reach sort of points where you need to make a decision, and just making the decision that feels best for me at that time is I'm always moving forward in a way that feels right to me. And so I've never really regretted any of the decisions that I've made, because at any moment I'm just making the best choice that I can. And so that's a totally okay way to approach how you're going to move into the future.
Hey, thank you. So we have a question from Raj.
Hi, so I'm someone who's not sure if I want to go into industry or pursue graduate school yet. And I was kind of wondering, like, what my options are going into industry. So like, when I graduate, I'm going to have a degree in physics, right? And so when I'm applying to something like a data science job or an engineering job, I want to know, like, why would one of those companies ever look at my resume and hire me as a physics degree over someone with an engineering or data science degree? And what can I do to help my application like tailor towards those, like, either engineering or data science things?
I would say that very rarely does the subject of your degree matter. There might be some hiring managers that care a lot about that, but you know, you probably don't want to work for those folks anyway if they're obsessed with a certain degree type. What matters on your resume and in an interview process is what skills do you bring to the table? And say it's data science that you want to go into. I would list on your resume the things that people are looking for, and the things, you know, okay, study up on the things that people look for in that role, in an introductory data science or data analyst role. Try to gather and learn those skills in the time you have remaining in your undergrad. There are lots of blogs, there's lots of resources and books that you can go to these days, but tailor your resume toward that. And throughout your interview process, you're going to speak to those skills. And so, you know, it's going to look like things like, hey, I have this many years of experience in Python. I have this many, I've done these kinds of projects. I've done these kind of projects. Here's an example of some coursework I've done, things like that. And then go from there. So I think it's really important to tailor your resume toward kind of what is expected for that role, so that you at least have an idea for that, and then add your own flavor to it so that you stand out. So it doesn't look like 100 other resumes. So it's like, yeah, it's like, you know, it's like knowing a genre of music, but you don't want to be so derivative that you sound like a copy of everyone else. So I'd look at it that way, if that helps.
I think I'd add that being a little bit different with a physics degree can make you stand out. It's not necessarily even a bad thing. And for me, I think the skill that we don't necessarily identify having gotten a physics degree is the level of problem solving training that goes into a physics major. That is a really unique part of it, I think, compared to a lot of other majors, the way that they're taught. The fact that you can take a problem, right? We write all these things down, you figure out, you identify the variables, you break it down, and then you use techniques to solve the problem. being able to highlight that skill, I think it is unique compared to even some of the other majors that you listed. They're not going to be taught in quite the same way.
Okay, thank you. Anyone want to add anything to that? Or otherwise we'll go on. There are questions from here.
Hi, if you can hear me, I have a question for the person who recently joined us that's working in education and outreach. Do you think that having a PhD positioned you to have more options in pursuing education and outreach? Do you find that that was a helpful thing to do, like a leg up, or would you also, or do you think someone would be able to do something that you're doing right out of undergrad?
That's a good question. I've thought about that a lot. The answer is yes and no. Like there are definitely positions in that space that require a PhD, mostly ones that interface more with data or the technical sides of things. So like for our program, we want to highlight data from the observatory and all of the products that we're creating. And that's why we needed a trained astronomer. But I don't think it's necessary to have a PhD to get into that sort of space. Like I mentioned, we have a woman who taught in high schools for 30 years on our team now. We have a science writer, web developers. So it's tricky. It opens some doors, but not others. And so I think it's really a way to think about it is which skills in that space would you find most exciting, and making sure, sort of like Taka was saying, that you have those skills for those jobs. So if you're interested in more of the, actual science writing side of things, then trying to do some things to be able to put those skills on your resume would be the kind of thing that helps you land that next career. So it helps, having the knowledge helps, but the skills are really how you're going to use your skills to apply that knowledge to this new job that we have is equally important.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from the MMO-RU.
Yeah, hi. I have a question for Lauren. What does your day-to-day job look like, and what are your most favorite and maybe least favorite parts of your work?
Yeah, I think I'll answer that for my current job, but also my previous job. So right now I'm the head of my team. So I spend 100% of my time doing the typical things that are management, I think pretty much anywhere. I have to, there are timesheets, there are contracts, all of that sort of thing that I'm managing. But the fun part of my job is that I get to work with the team that I work with. So I really like being in this space because of how diverse the skills on my team have to be. So pretty much no one on my team has the same skill set. So that's really interesting. I've learned a lot about how do you build a website? What are best practices for writing alt text for social media? Like these things that I wouldn't have known, but I have people on my team who do, and that's really fun for me. And I also like being the head of the team and that I get to do that big picture thinking. What are all the big things that we're trying to achieve? How am I helping the team set goals that we're working towards? And like providing that sort of leadership and clarity to everyone. That's really fun for me. But previously my role was working as the astronomer on the team. And that was a lot more of the hands-on, like working with data. And that was also interesting. The Rubin Observatory is doing things in pretty much every field of astronomy. And when you get a PhD, you hyper specialize into one specific thing. And I was actually a theorist, so I never worked with data. And then I joined the observatory and they're like, we need solar system data and supernova data. And I had to go out and be able to learn all of those different fields and provide data for the team. So you sort of get to do everything when you're doing education and public outreach. You're hitting a whole bunch of stuff and you get to use astronomy throughout all of it. It is fun. Okay. Hopefully I answered every part of your question. I started talking and then maybe missed something. So if I missed something, feel free to re-ask.
Yeah, I think also, what is your favorite and maybe least favorite part of your work?
Yeah. So like I said, I think my favorite part is sort of doing that strategic thinking for the team. And also sort of getting to build the culture of the team. So making sure it's a place where people, like for me, it's a goal that people are happy to come to work. If people are stressed out all of the time, then I think that means I'm not doing my job correctly as the head of the team to make sure people are happy and feel successful in their work. So that's important to me and something I really enjoy doing. My least favorite thing is, I don't know, whenever I need to track things down. Like I've got 16 emails in my inbox that are just me responding like, hi, where is this? Yes, that's okay. Like those sorts of, just menial tasks that go with the paperwork of managing something.
Okay, thank you.
Two things. One, we need to plug in the laptop. Got one battery.
Thank you.
And then two, I have a question that any one of the four panelists can answer. So how is it maintaining a source of income while you're pursuing a graduate degree, whether it be your end goal in industry or research?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I didn't hear that very well.
Yeah, sorry about that. So
That's
how
okay.
is maintaining a source of income while you're pursuing a graduate degree, whether your end goal is research or industry?
You get paid normally as a graduate student, and so you have a salary while you're getting your PhD. It's not a high salary, like you'll definitely be making more if you go directly into industry. But I lived in New York City on my salary, and I didn't have a second job or anything. I just managed the money that I had to be able to continue, and I was happy doing it. So for me, it was that was how I did it. I just got paid to be a grad student.
Yeah, same here. And the kind of the way you'll hear this described is that you're kind of sacrificing some income now for higher potential earnings in the future. If you were to go on and get a PhD, that tends to come with higher salaries kind of for the rest of your career. I'm not sure if that's always the case anymore. I think that you have to balance that with what you want to do, what you enjoy doing. If you enjoy astronomy and enjoy being in research and stuff like that, maybe that's worth it to you to be able to, have a little less money now while you're getting a PhD versus just taking the highest paying job you can find right out of undergrad. Either way is fine. I think it just depends on each individual person and what they're looking to get out of kind of that phase of their life.
Yeah, I took a few side gigs while I was in grad school. I did some translation on the side. I taught at a private high school, which actually helped again with my communication skills and giving talks and explaining things to people. Yeah, so like real talk, I think like graduate school stipends are somewhere, anywhere from like 25,000 to 45,000. I think it's like that's kind of like the ballpark range for grad school stipends. You don't have to pay tuition usually, so there's that. I would say like take industry or software engineering. It's not uncommon for someone straight out of college to make $100,000 a year plus bonus. So there's a significant difference, especially when you're talking like 5-6 years of it. And then if you want to do a postdoc, things like that.
Yeah, I'll just add that generally the sort of academic path of grad school, postdoc, even professor is not going to be the most like financially lucrative possible thing that you could do. Generally, the salaries in industry are going to be much higher than you'll be making as a professor. But there are other benefits. So just you need to weigh what's most important to you and what's going to bring you the most joy in your life. But you should definitely be getting paid as a grad student, whether through a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is from Rachel.
Hi, everybody. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Just checking. Okay, great. This is kind of a generic question for everybody, but I want to know what success is to you and if you consider yourself successful. I know that's different for a lot of people, so I feel like that's the best way to ask everybody such a generic question, but thanks in advance.
That's a hard question. Who would like to start?
I guess I'll try to start out. So I like that I do really enjoy going to work each day, and the data science that I'm doing, whether it's doing research for a client, whether it's finding an effective way to summarize results. I still really enjoy doing that, and that's a joy that I got out of grad school whenever I was doing astronomy and doing research there. And even though I've shifted industries now and I work with like a lot of different data and a lot of different fields, I still enjoy just that kind of core like exploration of data and discovering stuff within it. And so the fact that it may not be astronomical data anymore, I do miss astronomy, but I still get the joy out of it. So I think as long as that continues to be the case, as long as I still enjoy loading up some new data set and finding whatever is inside of it, I'll consider that a success.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot in my own way as I've, pivoted in my career many times. I'll say like, one thing is like, do you like what you do for work? Like, do you like going to work? I think that's like probably a major factor, and that's probably like that should be number one, I think, on a lot of people's lists. If you don't like doing what it's like, what's the point? I think another thing is how stable is it? And that ultimately was what I really struggled with in academia, just doing postdoc after postdoc, moving every couple of years. I spent 3 years in Europe, just to keep my career going. And I enjoyed some parts of that, and there's some parts of it that just got old. I think one thing in industry is like if you have a track record as a software engineer or data scientist, even if your company goes under and you lose your job, you're not going to be unemployed for very long. So there is an element of what I call career stability if you in certain industry roles, depending on your skill set. So I think success is, to me, that's a part of success. Do you like what you're doing? And can you keep doing what you're doing, even if something happens at the current job, whether it be you don't like it, the company fails, whatever. And then third, it's like, are you making ends meet? Obviously, like you have to be, if you have a family, right, you want to be able to provide, or, at least pay rent and things like that. So even if you're living alone, you want to be able to buy food and rent. And it's like, and to me, you have to have all three of those things, right? You have to be making ends meet, you have to like what you're doing, and there has to be an element of stability so you can keep doing it. And to me, if you have all three of those things, that, that to me is success.
Yeah, for me, I would say that success is being able to generally balance all of the different aspects of my identity. And so, my career is a big part of that, being a professor and an astronomer, but also being able to, balance that with time spent with my partner and my pets, and time spent on my hobbies and outdoors. And if I feel like I'm generally able to balance all of those things such that they're all a significant part of my life, then I feel like I'm successful. In a sort of career sense, I feel like I'm successful if I'm helping my students towards their goals in the best way that I can, and helping them on their paths towards whatever their end goal is.
And I don't have anything to add. I agree with what everyone said. I think it's finding that balance, trying to prioritize being happy over other things to a limit, right? There are still financial realities that has to come into play. But I think part of it too is I feel like I've been successful in identifying when I don't have those things and then taking action to fix them. It's really easy, especially if you've been in a place for a while, to just not recognize or to ignore the signs of some things aren't going so well, but being able to really have that check-in and then to make a change is part of what I'm proud of and thinking of myself as successful.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from here?
I wanted to ask just generally, for those that have significant others, what has it been like navigating with your career and your relationship?
I'll say the early academic career path was really hard for my partner. We moved to Germany for 3 years right after grad school to do a postdoc. I liked elements of living in Germany, and it just did not work for my partner. And then when we moved back closer to the New York City area for my second postdoc, it basically spelled the end of my academic career. It was a career disaster for me. So like balancing those two things was really hard. With the academic job market, you don't have a lot of say in where you get to land. So if you know you want to be near a certain area or in a certain state, or if those preferences are really strong, that's going to limit your options. And sometimes, you can be pleasantly surprised at where you end up, as I think Vivian alluded to. But yeah, it was, for me, probably, it goes back to the career stability thing. It was one of the biggest reasons why I left academia. It's like, I feel like I'm smart enough to earn a paycheck somewhere, and why can't it be where I want it to be? So that was a major factor.
Yeah, it can be really challenging. So I didn't have the problem that a lot of people have when they're starting professor positions, which is that I moved out here without a significant other. So I was able to just pick where I was going to go. And I didn't worry at that time about whether my partner was going to have a placement. So I met my partner after I moved here, but we still had to be pretty creative. So he was working elsewhere in the country at the time, and we did long distance for about a year. And then he just a few months ago transitioned to full-time remote work. So we're now able to live in the same place because here in Pullman, there's not a lot of job opportunities if you're not affiliated with the university. So we've definitely had to be creative. And these are very real challenges that are super common. Yeah, there's honestly no easy answer. But it helps if one partner can be somewhat flexible or is able to work remotely. If you're going to have one partner in an academic position where you don't have a lot of flexibility or choice.
Okay. So would any of the others like to add anything to that, or should we go on to the next question? No? Okay. Our next question is from the chat from a while ago, actually. And this one is for Cody and Taka. Could you elaborate on what made you switch from physics/astro to your current position? And you've alluded to some of this already, but could you say anything more? Would you like to say anything more on that?
Yeah, I think summarizing just a couple of different things I said over the course of this chat. For me, it was a combination of, I realized that I love things outside of pure astronomy research and could find that, fulfillment elsewhere, in industry. There was also an element of what Taka was just talking about, where I didn't feel like I wanted to maybe live somewhere I didn't want to live. I'm based in Chicago and I really like Chicago and I wanted to stay there. And so the decision to go into industry was also kind of partially motivated by that, as opposed to, finding a postdoc somewhere else in the country. And I think, yeah, those are my two main things that kind of motivated that decision for me to leave academia and go into industry.
Yeah, I think it was basically I had to leave academia. So there's the saying that, publish and perish. I wrote, I think I wrote about 20 papers in my time in academia. And in my last year in academia, I basically didn't write a single first author paper. And, my supervisors at the time kind of saw me slumping and were kind of disappointed with my work output because it didn't match what I had been doing previously. And at that point, it's like, how can you apply and get a faculty position if you haven't been publishing the last year and a half? And so at that point, it was a combination of like, I had burned out. I was not performing as I had been, and the writing was on the wall. And another part of it is, it's I just felt like, again, like I felt like I was good enough to be unemployed somewhere, and so it was this kind of it wasn't bitter, but it was just kind of this realization. It's like, I really like the field of astronomy, but I don't think the field likes me back as much, right? It's basically, how many papers have you written for us lately? And I was really lucky to find a career that I could thrive in, and it was, I'll be honest, I think it was pure luck and accident that I landed where I did, because I was completely lost at the end of my academic career.
Okay, thank you. Any question from you?
This is kind of like a weird question because none of you guys had this like path, but you guys kind of shared both of them, I guess. Is it like maybe a common thing or like a possible thing to maybe either start in industry and then become like a professor or something afterwards? Like, does being in industry, could that help you at all if you wanted to become a professor?
Any of you have any insight?
I don't think it's impossible. I will say it's definitely unusual. I know of a few folks that tried industry for a year or two and then went back to academia. I think like longer hiatuses it's gonna, depending on who your colleagues back in academia are going to be, like they will want to know more about that, let's say. I'll say like, I think it's different. Like once you're like an executive or a company leader, then it's much easier to find like partnerships with universities and departments. It's like, oh, yes, we would like your expertise affiliated with this department. So I think there are paths back to at least academic affiliations. But I would say it's at this, in my experience, it's pretty, it's not too common.
I think it does depend though on like when that gap happens. So I think what Taka's describing is more you've gotten your PhD and you go to industry and you're trying to come back. I think there's a little bit more flexibility after your undergrad before you go to grad school, like before you start that whole academic train. Like once you're in grad school, you're sort of on the train and you got to keep going with it until you get off. But those time before, I do think there is some flexibility there. I think it's becoming, it depends on the school too, depending on where you're applying, if they're going to prefer people who are coming right out of undergraduate or not. And so just knowing that will come into play. But yeah, so I think there's a little bit of space. Oh, the last thing I was gonna say, too many years though, and I think it would start to raise questions of like, oh, well, their physics knowledge was so far in the past, like, will they succeed in our program or not? But I do think between undergrad and grad, there's a little bit more of that flexibility.
Yeah, I'll also add it also depends on what kind of relationships you maintain while in industry. Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I feel lucky that I've stayed connected to a lot of my astronomy peers. So like, if I find myself with some free time, I feel comfortable talking to, my old colleagues and saying, hey, you want to write a paper together? And I feel like I can still do that. So it's like, yeah, I think it's, it's not very common, but, there are paths back if you're really set on it.
Thank you. A question from Griffin.
Hi, so my question was regarding, like Vivian, you had spoken earlier about like mental health struggles and anxiety in grad school. Like what helped you find an appropriate path through that? Like how did you know that you were making like the correct decisions in the face of like internal adversity? Like how did you, and to the group at large, like how have you navigated like seeking fulfillment, and how has that led you to where you're at now?
So I would say in terms of what helped me navigate that, therapy is great. Highly recommend for anyone who is, thinking about it. That really helped me sort of develop the tools that I needed to manage my anxiety and realizing that my self-worth was not tied to my success in graduate school. So trying to cultivate those other aspects of my identity and finding things that took me away from, research and classes for a little bit and helped me find fulfillment elsewhere, really helped me manage that anxiety at that time. And I really did love the research that I was doing. So it always felt worth it to me but I definitely did need, need to develop those skills to cope. That was really important. And if you feel like if anyone feels like they are struggling with that, you are definitely not alone. It's very, very common in academia to struggle with those sorts of things. So I would say trying to remember that your identity is not just your academic path, and reminding yourself about the other parts of your identity that you enjoy.
Thank you. I saw everybody else nodding. Would anyone like to add anything to it? Like tools they use to move forward?
Yeah, I'll say that oh, sorry, go ahead,
Go
Taka. Okay, I'll go ahead. I had a pretty good relationship with grad school overall, I think. I definitely know some friends who struggle with the exact kind of things that both you, Griffin, and Vivian were talking about. I know that I definitely had periods where I saw someone in the chat mention imposter syndrome as well. I'd say that was the biggest thing for me in terms of like negative effects on my mental health in grad school is that's a very common one. So you're definitely not alone if you are ever feeling that in grad school. I was grateful that I had a really good group of people that I shared an office with who are of similar cohort to me, not in my same area of research, but we were pretty close. And so I felt like I had a really good support system in those people where we could talk about issues we were having, frustrations we were having. And I know that that would never get back to, the people or the systems that I was frustrated with within the department. And just being able to talk with them was often very helpful because they were often going through the same kind of things and we could kind of commiserate on that, figure out who to talk to, things like that. So in addition to everything that Vivian said, which I think was all fantastic advice, building that support system within your own kind of grad program, whether it's your friends, your advisor, other people in the department, I think was really important for me as well.
Yeah, I'll totally second the support system. Just grad school, as soon as you get there, find your people. Find the people that you can vent with, who understand what you're going through. That's so important. And on a related note, make sure your advisor gets you, or that you can work together with them. I've seen some senior academics say things like, "Oh yeah, I don't waste my time with mediocre students." It's like probably not the best kinds of people to support you when you're struggling. So try to gauge that. Like as much as there's a focus on oh, I really like this, project ideas or like this topic, definitely also feel out if your advisor is a good person to work with. And another thing is, like I said earlier, a huge part for me of grad school was figuring out how to do research, which I had really never done before. And learning to do new things, which you will have to do in grad school as a part of your PhD, and you might have to do in industry as well, requires you to kind of rediscover what your A game looks like and define that. Whereas in undergrad, you might have been okay at taking courses or doing research projects or writing papers for coursework, you're going to have to learn new skill sets and achieve new objectives. And then it's like learning a different sport. And it takes a while to figure out what that A game looks like. And then once you figure that out, then it's a matter of okay, I felt good doing what I did last week. How do I get back to that? How do I make that consistent? That to me was a big part of the struggle. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think it's a pretty common problem.
Yeah, I think I'll add on first a second plug for therapy. It's definitely helpful. If that's a thing that you think would be helpful, definitely at least try it and see how it goes. A second plug for support groups, personally within my cohort, but also thinking about support from a mentor or someone a little bit older or further down the line than you are. So for me, it wasn't necessarily a professor, but some of the older graduate students wound up being what I think of as mentors and people I could ask advice from and that sort of a thing. And then sort of two things. First, a big thing for me has been recognizing the information that's coming from my emotions. That if I'm feeling something, it's probably telling me something that I haven't consciously identified yet. So like, I am upset. Like, I'm not a kind of person who just gets upset for no reason. So there must be a reason, and what is it? So like using them as signposts almost to help me identify like what is going wrong, what is upsetting me. And then I'd like to be action oriented. So can I speak to someone? Is there something new I can try? But like not just dismissing them and saying like, oh, well, I don't want to feel that way anymore, but like, why am I feeling that way? It's probably useful information. So that was one side, but then another side for me too was also that struggle of like, college was very structured. Here are my assignments. Here's when I turn them in. I take this test, and all of that's built for you. And then you get into grad school and you're like, well, work on this project for 5 years. Good luck. And that was really difficult for me, and just constantly struggling with, am I being productive enough? Am I not? And in my position now, what I wish I had known then is that like industry has thought about this. Like there are whole standards and like setups and technologies to help people manage their work and plan their work and be productive. And there's this sense in astronomy of like, oh, management, business, bad. No, we can never talk about it. But like, there's a reason management exists, and there are some good things to take away from it. So like, if that's a thing that you're struggling with, like seek out some of these other resources outside of your advisor, who probably also doesn't know anything about management. But there are tools to help you build in that structure that for me was really missing from grad school. And now that I have it back, it feels great. So.
Okay, thank you all. I think this will be the last, maybe the last chance for a question from this room. Any last burning questions? Okay, then we have a last hand up, which is from Benjamin again.
Hello, let me just get my question. Oh, so I know there was discussions about like finding the right advisor, but I have kind of a more broad question. Like, I guess, how do you balance going into grad school, not necessarily knowing what specific field you want to go into, or which advisor you necessarily want to work with? Because I kind of have an idea of what I want to focus on, but that may completely change over the ending years of my undergrad, or if I find something really interesting. So how do you like balance that or work through that?
Okay, I would say that if you have some idea of the field that you want to, the specific field you want to go into, then try to choose somewhere where there's at least a few faculty who are working on that in that area. And then beyond that, some programs have a structure built in where you can work with a couple of people before committing. So things like a first year project, and then you reevaluate at the end of that year with the sort of understanding going in that, you know, this is a 1 year thing, and then we decide if we want to keep going. And then you really have to meet with professors, you know, ask about their advising style, ask what they're looking for in a graduate student, because it's a big decision for you, and it's a long time to be working with someone, and you want to make sure that it's somebody who you can have a good relationship with. And I would say that for me, that was more important than the exact research area that I was working in. Was working with someone who I got along well with, and who was really supportive and a kind person. So talking to people, asking, you know, what their priorities are, what they're looking for in a student, what's their mentoring style. These are all things that your professors should be thinking about and should be able to answer for you and help you determine whether you're a good fit, because ultimately it's in both of your interests to be a good fit.
Yeah, I think another approach that I've seen taken a lot is that whenever you're going through the application process to graduate schools is to try and identify a few of those professors like Vivian mentioned, and try to reach out to them early in that process during application, whether it's through email or whatever contact information they may have, and just try to get a feel for, you know, if they're working on the kind of stuff that you would like to work on, if they have a good place for you in their group is also really important. And also to, again, early on, build that relationship and try and understand, is this the right person to be working with? Do our interests and, you know, kind of goals align? All that stuff, because it is a really important step. I think it's probably the most important decision that you make in grad school is who you work with. Hopefully it doesn't sound too stressful. I don't mean to make you worry about it, but it's an important thing to hopefully suss out early on, is your relationship with your advisor. And if it's not going well, I think it needs to be something that you're willing to change. I know students who switch advisors because they purely for the reason they didn't get along with that particular person. And I've known other people who tried to stick with those advisors and ended up kind of getting driven out of the field because they just didn't enjoy the work anymore due to a bad relationship with an advisor. So I think it's on both you and the advisor to do well. You can try and be active in building that relationship as best you can, but they should also be doing some work as well to kind of make sure you're progressing well through the program, that you're learning what you need to learn, all that kind of stuff. So it's a two-way relationship. And I think it's important to remember that kind of from very early on all the way through your grad school. Yeah.
Thank you. Would anyone like to add to those answers?
I think the only thing I'll say is that I followed all of this advice, but my approach was entirely like, I could be interested in any topic in astronomy for the most part, but I really need to like the person that I'm working with. So I picked my grad school entirely based off the one that I went to where students seemed happiest, where I got along with them the most, and I liked the professors. And then I picked my advisors truly just based on, did I like them and feel like we could work together? And then the science flowed from there. So that is also an option. The topic can be important, but for me, it was much less important than the people I was working with and for.
I'll just say that this is also an important thing when you're going into industry. Like, are you going to work well with your boss and your team? Hugely important. Like, are they going to mentor you or just tell you what to do? And if they're not looking out for your best interests, you probably don't want to be there. And even if you did go there, you probably aren't going to stay there for long.
Thank you. So we're getting close to the end. Okay, so I think I have one question from the chat that I would like to get to. So I would like to ask all the panelists to say in like 2 words what they like most about their job and what they like least about their job. So very summarized, if you can.
I mean, I sort of already answered this question, so I can go first. But what I like most about my job, in addition to what I said, is I really like that my job is thinking about what are the coolest parts of astronomy and how do I communicate that to people. That was what I had always found fun, and just getting to think about space is fun. What we do is really cool, and getting to share that with people. And then, yeah, my least favorite part is still all of the paperwork that I need to do.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have a summary of favorite and least favorite components?
I'll say the favorite part of my job and what I do is in data science consulting is just the kind of breadth of stuff I get to work with. Lots of different fields all the time, moving between projects and like kind of learning a lot of new things about those fields as I work on projects in those areas. It's a very different experience to grad school, which was being very focused on, one specific thing for years at a time. And something that I've really enjoyed as I've kind of made this transition into industry. I guess also least favorite part is a lot of the management stuff. I'll kind of second what Lauren said there. Not that management is a bad thing. I want to be very clear about that. It's very important to do that stuff well. It's just that it sometimes feels like it's taking away from, the actual things that you really enjoy doing, which is like exploring the data, coding, stuff like that. So I will say this is probably my least favorite part, but it's also a very important part of the job. And so a necessary evil, if you will.
Management comes for us all. If you're going to be good at your job, eventually management comes for you.
So my favorite part of my job, so 2. One is just the astronomy research part. I love putting together observational puzzles and taking all these different pieces of evidence and trying to answer the questions that I'm interested in. And then mentoring my graduate students is incredibly rewarding. I love being able to see them make research progress and build their skills and start coming up with questions on their own and things to explore. And I really just love the mentoring aspect of my job. My least favorite is having to write a lot of grant proposals so that I can fund my students through research assistantships. It takes a lot of time, and it can be very stressful waiting to hear back, and sort of that pressure is the least favorite part of my job.
I'll say my favorite part of my job is the people I work with. So whether it be just, being clever with them, guiding them through projects, knowing that my peers in both on the team and other folks appreciate the work, and I appreciate the work that they're doing. I think it's just an awesome collaborative feeling, and it's why I show up to work and do hours and hours of Zoom and project meetings. I'd say the least favorite part is is explaining to people why this is not the best way to do things, and then that's much harder than telling people yes. But in management roles, I found that it's very important to say no, and so doing that in a really constructive way can feel good, but there's often a lot of friction. And so that's probably the part that's the most stressful about my job, is just explaining to people why my team will refuse to, or I will refuse to have my team do it this way because it doesn't make sense, and here's why.
Thank you. Well, thank you for answering that last question, and thank you so much, all of you, for being here with us today and answering all these questions. And so I'd like everyone else to just give a big round of applause for our panelists. And thank you for all the REU programs from all over the US for joining us for this live discussion today, and for anyone who's watching on YouTube as well.